Please welcome Director of Alok, Alex Hedison.
You're still here.
Thank you so much for being here. To start off, I want to ask, very early in the film, you include this very powerful line from your interviews with Alok, particularly that they say that the most controversial pronoun they have is we, rather than they. Can you talk about the impact and the significance of that line?
Yeah, that line summed up the entire project. It summed up what I was learning from Alok as I was going. It summed up the experience of making the film and working with two of the producers who are here today, Elizabeth Bodwin and Natalie Sharanian, right here. It summed up the experience I was having in real time with some of Alok's friends. Maury Fontanez is here, who is in the film. The friends I met from South Africa to Namibia, to the East Coast, Los Angeles, everywhere I went with Alok, I was meeting this community of people, of thinkers, of artists, activists, just extraordinary people who were opening my mind and educating me as I was going. And the process of filmmaking is a we process. It's not a singular effort. And as an artist, I'm a photographer. That is a discipline that I got to do for the most part by myself. So for me embarking on this project, it was a we project. And I had to also use all parts of myself. So when Alok says the most controversial pronoun is we, it's not they, Alok is also talking about for them, they need to pull in all parts of themselves, including the parts that they want to exile, that they want to not exist, that they would prefer to be different. They're bringing in all parts in order to be who they are in the moment.
And it's interesting to sort of hear how that came about when you were filming. Did you have a particular direction in mind when you set out to capture all of these moments, or was finding it organically, was that the intention?
I really was finding it organically. I had no preconceived idea of what we were doing, only that I was having such a big experience, as many people who were following Alok at this point online or had seen their work, listened to them, read their poetry. Alok has so much to say, and the way they express themselves is extraordinary. And my first conversation with them just was life-changing, and I thought, I have to spend more time and I have to record it. I have to record it, I have to look at it, and I need to share it with a larger audience. People need to hear what they're saying. So I didn't know how I was going to do it. It started off as a very small project, and then I kept expanding. I would go to a different city with them, and then I'd go off and do work, my own work, separately, and then I'd come back, and it just kept moving and moving forward.
And their work has such an interesting character and this very unique character to it, where there's this academic and intellectual side to the ideas, but there's also this profound, emotional, personal self-expression, and it's this very unique tone. And you've carried it over very well in your film. Can you talk about being able to carry that over and not losing that in translation?
That's such a good question. Isn't that a good question? Thank you. There's so many things that are unique about it, Alok, but the combination of being a third-generation PhD student and a poet, like that combination makes for the most extraordinary expression of thought and emotion happening all at the same time. Alok is poetry. There's so many different parts of themselves at play at once, and the way they communicate their ideas is both, with your mind, there's so much to think about, but also you sense what they're saying. And Alok says it's not about making sense, it's about making sensation. And they really do both. So with this film, I knew from the beginning, I want this film to be a reflection of them. I don't want to project something onto them. And especially with trans people, I think that there's so much projection. So it felt important to me to make this piece feel like a poem, to queer the art of filmmaking itself by making it go forwards and backwards in every which way, having it start at the beginning but also at the end. The first shot is actually at the end of the journey. The audience doesn't know that, but we're in the car, and it was one of the last shots I had with them. So it was, I wanted to cut it up. I wanted to bring different media into it. I wanted to bring archival footage and visuals that kind of had nothing to do with what they were saying and everything to do with what they were saying. So I wanted it to be so much that was happening at once, and at the same time, I wanted you to be able to hold on to the idea, because sometimes when you use too much, our minds go blank and you can't follow. So I'm hoping that it was concise enough that you actually got the message while being completely overwhelmed with sensation.
It's interesting to hear you talk about weaving all of those pieces together, because one of the things I was so struck by was the editing of the film and kind of the way it was constructed. It's got this very mosaic, it's almost like a mosaic, the way you've weaved everything together, and it's very organic and it feels very alive. Can you talk about finding that feel?
Yeah, so we worked with two editors, Akeem Mendoza and Dylan Bell. I really feel for them still, because we went through a lot. It was a lot of time. I started working with Akeem at the beginning, and Akeem had just graduated from USC, and I called this editor who I was hoping to work with, and she said, like, I don't do short films, but I'm going to give you to my favorite TA, to Akeem, and he was really good. And I started working with Akeem, and we were able to together, like he was, I think because he had just come out of school, he was really willing to just try anything. And I would say to him, like, look, there's this scene, I have Alok, and they're rehearsing their lines, and it's like an incantation. It's like this thing that keeps repeating, and I want to be able to get inside their head and see things backwards and forwards. I want it to be like a mosaic. I want it to be like the poem itself that they're saying. How can we do that? So try editing this, try cutting it here, we sat for hours, and that was one of the first pieces that we made. And I kind of built the film around that disorder. And so it was just an interesting process. Also, the idea of there are two editors, and for any of you who are techies, they were working with two different editing softwares, which is like, you just don't do it. That's just the worst thing you could possibly do, because when they're trying to compare notes and when they're trying to work together, it's like working with people who are speaking two totally different languages, which of course, again, seemed appropriate to the project. It ended up working out.
And you're talking about sort of the breadth of ideas included and all sides of a person. You are able to present, this view into Alok's work, but also this very intimate portrait of them as a person and as an artist behind the work. Can you talk about finding the balance between those two things and not necessarily shortchanging one of them in such a short film?
I hope I didn't shortchange. I mean,
you did an incredible job.
Thank you. It was so hard because there are so many aspects to Alok, and all of them are endlessly interesting. So I remember the first week that I followed them around, we were back east, and I didn't know what to expect. So the first night we went to a talk they were giving at Smith College with a gender studies professor, and it was fascinating. Second night, we go to a youth center, and they're talking to a bunch of trans youth, and it was extraordinary. Then we're in New York City, and they're doing performance art for 5-year-olds. And it was mind-blowing. And then they said, oh, well, we have a performance tomorrow night. It's comedy. I was like, what do you mean comedy? Well, I'm doing stand-up. Really, are you? Because no. Like, you can't be doing all these things and also stand up. It doesn't, so again, like, even my binary thinking, like, are you a poet and a writer and a scholar? You can't also be a stand-up. And they're an extraordinary stand-up. So it's like trying to get pieces of it without, like, it's not a full-length documentary. I just couldn't go down every road. So when they said that statement about we and all of the parts, it was like, oh, that's what it is. It's everything at once. And we both happen to love that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, like this idea that it is everything, and to just try and get it, and to get the message in the middle is the sweet spot.
And one of the ways you seem to have incorporated that element of we, the film has this almost conversational aspect to it. You bring in all of these prominent voices through these talking head segments, Dylan Mulvaney, Channy Nicholas, among others, and we're watching them sort of interact with Alok's ideas in real time, and there's a conversation started. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was the last shoot, and actually it was Elizabeth and Natalie who said, like, okay, you need to do one more interview with Alok, because at that point, I'd been shooting for a year and I had no idea what the direction of the film would be. So they suggested doing another interview. Alok happened to come to Los Angeles. We scheduled the shoot, and we scheduled a dinner party with their friends. And I thought, you know what? Let me just interview their friends, because I'd interviewed a bunch of people in South Africa, Namibia, and back east. I thought, let's just see what happens. So I'm hosting a dinner party. I'm shooting Alok. I'm also running people upstairs to, and Dylan's holding the camera, and I'm interviewing them. Half of the interviews you see in the movie were like in the middle of a dinner party. And I'm asking them questions, and each one, like, I just didn't even expect what was going to come out of their mouths. I mean, Maury came over. We had briefly met. She sat down in the living room, and I looked at her, and I thought, oh, we just need to shoot right now, shoot right here. And I just asked Dylan, I was like, can you come over? She's like, oh, do I have, no, let's just go. And she just started talking about Alok and the work she's done with Alok and the work she does in the world, and it was so impactful, and it anchored the film. So again, I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't know what I was doing or how I was doing it, but I think I had the right spirit of approach with the film, so.
And I mean, you've talked about going on tour and being around for all of these moments and the scope of the material you've captured. I mean, just from a logistical standpoint, what did that look like putting the final film together? I mean, what was the editing process like, I guess, just logistically?
Well, what happened is that by the time Elizabeth and Natalie came on board, and we also have another producer, Megan Lennon, I had shot most of the footage except for that last piece in Los Angeles. And they suggested, you know what, you need to edit this, and our deadline needs to be the deadline for the Sundance submission. I was like, well, that's kind of soon. Like, the deadline's like in, like, what was it, like 2 months or something? Oh, sorry, 4 weeks. It was 4 weeks. And I had like 45 hours of footage, but I'm good with a deadline. So they gave me the deadline. We shot in 4 weeks. We shot that last piece in LA, and I edited everything to get enough of a rough cut together to get it to the Sundance submission. I was just using it as a deadline. And then I just kept, for the next 2 months, just working and working and working and working on the edit nonstop. Again, not like, I didn't have any expectation. So when we got into Sundance, it was really unbelievable. It wasn't my expectation, and the more I understood like how difficult it is to get into a film festival, like Sundance are over 12,000 submissions, and we were one of 38 short films that got in. So it's pretty amazing. And the films that you saw today, they're They're 7 short films. Those films were chosen out of 38 films out of 12,000. So like it's, the numbers are kind of mind-boggling.
And it's an interesting prospect, you know, from their perspective. You come to them with the proposition of making this documentary and kind of following them on tour. What was, I guess, the collaboration between you and Alok like in terms of putting this together?
The collaboration, I would have to say, was more about trust and friendship than their participation in making it in terms of the edit. They just let me follow them around, and then I made the film. We basically made the film. They didn't even know what it was that I was going to do. So it was a lot of trust, but that trust came from our conversations, from the time we spent together, the way that I was answering their questions and sharing myself personally with them, so.
And I mean, you clearly have such a passion for their work and their ideas. It comes through hearing you talk, and it comes through in the film. I guess, given that passion and how their work has resonated with you, can you talk about this experience, how it's impacted you?
Yeah, another really good question. I think that every decision we make is the result of a series of decisions that were made up to that point. So for me, it's been really important to be aligned, meaning, how am I feeling in this moment? What is the next true thing? What is the next right move in anything that I do? And then I take that step and the next step and the next step. And if I ever feel like I'm off kilter, I then readjust and sort of switch directions. Alok, for me, and meeting Alok and getting into this project was the result of a lot of times, a long time in my life of making the decision to do the thing that felt right, even though I didn't know what that was. And it resulted in meeting someone like Alok and being able to say yes, knowing that it was the right thing. I don't know that this is a project I would have even been able to recognize 5 years prior. So saying yes to this and then really deepening my friendship with Alok has further kind of anchored me in that internal knowing. And I'm not trying to talk to like up here, but I'm just saying there's like, we know whether we're artists or writers or whatever we do as our profession, like we know when something feels right, and just listening to that and going with it, I feel like that's kind of the key for me at this point. And Alok has just invited me to be more of myself, to use more, to be bold, to have the courage to sometimes step out of the box that I put myself in, to kind of do something that's maybe a little bit different or something I wouldn't have expected.
And as we mentioned before the screening, this film is part of the Sundance short film tour that's showing around the country and here for the next week. So to finish off, I want to ask, what do you hope that audiences ultimately can take away from this film? It's tough to pin that down given the breadth of ideas we've covered, but what do you hope their takeaway can be?
I really hope that people can see that this is a film not just about Alok, but about you. I hope that everyone who sees this feels themselves in this. You know, this is not a film, and I've said this before, like, this isn't a film about, like, we have to protect trans rights. And yes, we have to protect trans rights. But trans people are just saying, hey, guess what? We're all changing. We're all in the midst of change. We're all unfolding. Every minute we're changing. So why are we going to stick to this old idea of what once was or what we should be or what we thought was? Like, go with the change, feel the change, bring all of yourselves to the picture and see what happens. So my hope with this film is that people recognize themselves and see it as an invitation to be more, do more, embrace as many parts of yourselves as possible.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor to talk to you here.
Thanks so much.
Spread the word, everyone. This short block will be playing here for the next week, so tell all your friends to come see it.
Thanks so much. Those were amazing questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.